Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. Welcome to another session of Indian Economy Essentials. And in today's session, let's have a discussion whether India is going through Hindu rate of growth. Now, what is the context of the discussion? Very recently, in one of the interviews that was given by one of the former RBI governors, Mr. Raghuram Rajan, stated that India is very close to the Hindu rate of growth. And once this interview was aired, it kick-started a lot of discussion about Indian economy, specifically about the terminology, what is Hindu rate of growth. In this video, let's have an understanding of it. Let me start with the basic idea here. What is Hindu rate of growth? The term Hindu rate of growth was coined by Professor Rajakrishna. Professor Raj Krishna was one of the faculties in Delhi School of Economics. And back in the 1978, he coined the term Hindu rate of growth. Now, many of you looking at the term Hindu will be believing in the concept that it is something to do with religion. But to be very fair here, no, it has got nothing to do with any kind of a religion. The argument that was put forward by various experts was that it could be associated with Hindu philosophy of thinking of fatalism, wherein we generally tend to believe that whatever is supposed to happen will happen. We are content with whatever will happen. But over a period of time, many of the experts pointed out that no, it doesn't have to do anything with that concept. The idea of a Hindu rate of growth, the terminology Hindu rate was coined because irrespective of any change in the government, irrespective of any change in the policy of the government, over a period of time, we ended up achieving very low rate of growth. That is, the rate of growth that we ended up achieving was generally at a lower level or below 4%. And that is the precise reason the growth rate that was achieved below 4% was referred to as Hindu rate of growth. Now, to put things in perspective, understand the logic here. From 1951, we started implementing 5-year plans. The first 5-year plan was implemented from 51 to 56, and thereafter second, third, etc. were implemented. But the features of the planning, right, if you look at the overall policies that were implemented by the government during the phase of planning, especially from 1950 to 1980 or 1990 even, you will realize that Government of India at this point of time implemented policies which led to import substitution. That is, in essence, whatever could be manufactured in India, we would manufacture it rather than importing it. We followed a policy of promoting public sector enterprises, especially if you look at the Industrial Policy Resolution of 1956, wherein most of the industries were categorized under Schedule A, wherein only Government of India was allowed to establish enterprises or only the government was allowed to set up companies. So you will see that the policies that were implemented were basically characterized or were implemented in order to promote import substitution, in order to promote manufacturing or self-reliance in the domestic market. It was majorly controlled by the government, that is the market or the industries were controlled by the government. This many experts stated that led to inefficiencies in the market, and these were the reasons why the growth rate in Indian economy was on a lower level or below 4%. For example, from 1950 to 1980, that is, let's say the 3 decades of planning in case of India, the average growth rate was somewhere around 3.4% to 3.5%. This was basically referred to as Hindu rate of growth. But to put the things perspectively, to understand the logic here, was India's growth rate the worst in the global market? Right? What was the India's performance compared to its peers? That's also very important, because what if I say you have scored 50 marks? I say you have scored 50 marks, 50 out of 100, done. But how do you understand whether this 50 marks is better, good, bad or worse? You need to compare with others. So to put the things in perspective, India's growth rate was much better than what was the growth rate of China. But it was still lagging behind many other countries such as, let's say, Korea. So that was the basic idea of a Hindu rate of growth. Now, why is there a discussion regarding Hindu rate of growth now? If you look at the latest announcement of GDP growth rate, that is the third quarter for the current financial year, NSO, which functions under Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, has announced that Indian economy for the third quarter of financial year 23 has achieved a growth rate of 4.4%. And Mr. Raghuram Rajan has compared this particular growth rate to other growth rates, that is the growth rates in the previous quarters, and based on many other parameters, he is saying that India is very close to achieving Hindu rate of growth, that is sub 4 or lower than 4% growth rate. For example, if you see for the second quarter, we achieved 6.3%, third quarter 4.4%. Now some of you will say, sir, but earlier quarters it was more than 6, more than 13%, etc. Now follow this very carefully. If you look at this particular graph that is there in the slide, the graph provides you what is the growth rate for various quarters. Starting from 16 to 17, what is the growth rate for individual quarters? It is not talking about annual growth rate, it is talking about quarter-wise growth rate. And you will observe one thing, that is in the recent times, that is in the last couple of years, there has been a recovery followed by a slowdown in the growth rate in the Indian economy. But having said so, again just a reminder here, it is not talking about annual growth rate, it is only quarter-wise growth rates. You will see there was a slowdown which culminated into a recession during pandemic. There was a recovery, now again there is a slowdown. That is point number 1. Point number 2, many of you will simply say, but sir, 13%, 21%, 9%, etc. These are much higher than 4% growth rate. For this, there is one more counter argument. Many of the experts have analyzed all of this data and they say that in the last couple of years, one of the reasons, again, it's not that all the quarters it is the same. One of the reasons, in some of the quarters the GDP growth rate is higher, it is because of the base effect. That is, we are calculating quarter-wise growth rates, and the base against which we are comparing the quarter, that particular quarter, the value of GDP was lower. And that is one of the reasons why the growth rate in some of the quarters, again not in all quarters, some of the quarters, it has been higher. Now let's have a critical evaluation. That is basically what are the factors which can say that we are moving towards a Hindu rate of growth, and is it correct? Is it correct to characterize this slowdown in recent quarters as a Hindu rate of growth? Let's start. 1. The argument is that interest rates very recently have been increased. Interest rates in the last 1 year have been increased, and as a result of higher interest rates, the lending activity has been affected. The companies have taken lesser value of loans, or will take again in the coming days lesser value of loans because the interest rates are higher. It has affected the loans even taken by consumers in the market. So this has led to lower offtake or lower demand in the market. And if RBI does not reverse it, if RBI does not reverse or basically stop the hike in the interest rates in the coming days, which is unlikely to happen, you might see further impact on investment in the economy. So already, if you look at the investments in the form of private sector investment, you will realize that private sector investment already is on a lower level. That is, it is on a basically a lower level compared to previous years. So this will further have an impact on private sector investment. Second, the growth rates which have been achieved in some of the quarters, right, such as let's say 13%, 18%, etc. In some of the cases, it has been seen that the growth rate is because of low base. That is, again, just to reiterate the point here, you compare GDP values of this quarter with the same quarter of the previous financial year. Quarter 3 GDP value for current year will be compared with quarter 3 GDP value of the previous financial year. What if in the previous financial year, just a hypothetical example here, What if in the previous financial year, in the quarter, the value of GDP was much lower? Now, obviously, because of that, the GDP of current financial year, you will feel it is much, much higher. That is GDP growth rate. It will become much worse in the coming days with slowdown expected to happen, recession expected to happen in other countries. And RBI, imagine it will continue to increase interest rate because the inflation rate for the month of January, it's not encouraging. It's much again beyond 6%. So if RBI continues the rate hike cycle, interest rates are further going to increase. In the global market, there is an impact, or there is going to be an impact of slowdown and recession which is expected to happen in the coming months, which will have an impact on exports from India, investments, etc. All of this again might impact and reduce the GDP growth rate. In fact, Reserve Bank of India already has stated in the fourth quarter of the current financial year, GDP growth rate could be much lower. Right, so these are some of the reasons why there is a concern of growth rate of Indian economy entering into the Hindu rate of growth phase. Having said so, is it correct to characterize this growth rate of 4.4% or even 4% as a Hindu rate of growth? What are the points against it? Point number one. Whenever you talk about Hindu rate of growth, it is not a quarter-wise comparison. It is always annual growth rates. Is it okay? I'll repeat it. Whenever you talk about Hindu rate of growth, it is not a quarter-wise comparison. It is always a comparison of annual growth rates. If the growth rate consistently remains low, below 4%, with very, very low per capita GDP growth rate, I'm clubbing 2 points here, point number 1 and point number 3 here. That is, whenever you talk about Hindu rate of growth, you expect one, GDP growth rate to be muted below 4% and the per capita GDP also to remain very, very low. And when both of the conditions are met, you generally refer to this as a Hindu rate of growth. For example, between 1900 to 1946, the GDP in case of India actually grew by 0.9%. 0.9%. And if you talk about per capita GDP, it grew by 0.1%. But if you look at the data later, that is from 1950 to 1964, right, the GDP growth rate was around 4.1% and per capita income actually grew by around 1.9%. So our argument is simple. Whenever there is a sustained low GDP growth rate and, right, let's say lower growth rate in per capita GDP, that is when you basically refer to this as a Hindu rate of growth. But in the context of India, first you are not talking about annual growth rate, you are simply looking at quarter-wise growth rate. And second one, what has happened to per capita GDP? Please have a look at it. As per the latest figures published by National Statistical Office, per capita GDP, it's not stagnating, it's not lower. It has actually started increasing. It has increased in the recent years. So it is wrong to characterize this growth rate as a Hindu rate of growth. Third one, recent growth rate that you are talking about, let's say 4.4% for the current quarter. One of the reason it came to 4.4% was the base was actually revised. That is, quarter 3 for financial year 22 was revised. In the same way, now the argument is the quarter 3 for financial year 23 will also be revised upwards. It could be, but it will be revised. It will of course be revised. So argument is even this will be revised. Why are you jumping to conclusion right now? Point 1 within this. And second point is, if there was no quarter-wise upwards revision in the third quarter of financial year 22, the actual growth rate for third quarter of financial year 23 could have been more than 5%. Right? So it is the impact of the base revision, that is a upward revision, not downward, upward revision of the base, that is the third quarter, that has led to lower growth rate for the third quarter in the current financial year. And the fourth point is, you're basically saying that the GDP growth rate in the last couple of years has been lower. Even you're making a comparison quarter-wise. But don't you think one of the reasons why GDP has taken an effect or has been hit in the recent years is because of the pandemic? So it's not a normal situation, point number 1. And second one is, Only India was not the country which was affected by pandemic. Many other countries have been affected by the issue of pandemic. So these are some of the points which have been given forward or put forward by various experts or economists in order to protect or in order to basically say that no, the current phase of growth rate in case of Indian economy is not a Hindu rate of growth. In fact, in addition to these points, you can also make a note of the IMF report. IMF report says that in the next 1 year, most of the growth that will take place in the international market will come from two countries, that is India as well as China, which means India's growth rate will be higher, it will not be Hindu rate of growth. So these are the various points in favor of the argument that India might be very close to Hindu rate of growth, or it could lead to Hindu rate of growth in the coming days, and arguments against the point that it's not a Hindu rate of growth. Factors are completely different. So that's the end of the discussion from my side. If you like the initiative, please hit the like button. Provide your valuable comments in the section below. And if you yet to subscribe to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS, kindly do it now. Thank you. Have a great day.